In just 6 minutes, a black female attorney shook the entire federal courtroom to its core. Under the glare of 3 live TV cameras, she exposed the true face of a powerful white judge, turning what was meant to be a quiet trial into a national reckoning. What no one expected was that the woman they underestimated would be the one to ignite a fire no one could put out. The real question is, what happened in those 6 minutes that made America hold its breath? Hit subscribe to follow stories that challenge power and redefine justice. And let us know in the comments where you're watching this from. At 8 a.m., the federal courthouse in the Western District was thick with the scent of pressure, as if even the bricks knew what was about to unfold. Jasmine Crockett, dressed sharply in a charcoal gray suit, strode confidently down the long hallway, the cold granite floors echoing beneath her feet. In her hand was a thick stack of files labeled in bold red state V's. Vance misappropriation of public funds. She was no stranger to pressure. She'd faced armed criminals and indicted police officers before. But today felt different. Not because of the case's gravity, but because of the name in the judge's seat, Raymond Huxley. As Jasmine pushed open the heavy wooden door to the courtroom, her eyes didn't first meet those of the jury or the public waiting in anticipation, but the cold, calculating gaze of the judge. It was slow, deliberate, as if he were sizing her up like a worthless item on a clearance shelf. Huxley didn't nod, didn't acknowledge her arrival with any formalities. Instead, he arched an eyebrow, glanced briefly at his watch, then looked at her as if to say, "Why are you here, and do you even deserve to be in this room?" Jasmine felt something tighten in her throat. Not fear, but the realization that she wasn't walking into a courtroom today. She was stepping into a fortress of power, one built long before her arrival. On the defendant's side, Dominic Vance, the wealthy real estate developer, was speaking softly with his personal attorney, absently toying with his expensive watch. They didn't look worried. Vance even turned to smile casually at a man in a suit near the prosecution bench, as if they were about to watch a cheap play. As Jasmine placed the files on the table, her eyes caught 3 reporters sitting in the last row, nodding politely in her direction. A camera was being adjusted. The court was open to the public today, and she knew every move she made would be scrutinized like a deflection. But what truly gnawed at her wasn't the cameras. It was the elderly woman sitting in the public gallery, her simple appearance in a worn coat. A security guard had just told her she was sitting in the wrong seat. The woman stood, bending slightly to apologize, but her eyes were filled with humiliation. Jasmine saw it, and she saw that the white man sitting next to her wasn't corrected, even though he was spilling out of his row. This wasn't a minor discrepancy. It was a silent message from this building: who has power and who doesn't. The heavy door slammed shut behind her. There was no turning back. Jasmine took a deep breath, adjusted her collar, and stared straight ahead where power sat high, cloaked in black robes, but with eyes full of bias. Her anger hadn't yet erupted, but it smoldered quietly beneath the surface like fire under ash. Jasmine knew today's battle wouldn't just be about justice for the state. It was a confrontation between truth and the decayed power that had survived too long on the silence of those who once stood where she stood. The sound of the stenographer's keys tapping away punctuated the heavy silence in the room, like an unsettling drumbeat signaling the rising tension about to consume the courthouse. Jasmine had barely stepped into the room before everyone's eyes were upon her, no longer out of curiosity, but with a calculated, cold scrutiny. It was as if they already knew everything about her, and were now simply waiting for her to falter, to make a mistake, to fail. The defense attorney, an aging man with the polished air of someone who had just come from a high-end cocktail party, slightly tilted his head and exchanged a knowing glance with the judge. The entire room felt like a performance of play in which Jasmine had not been given the script. Judge Huxley tapped lightly on the file in front of him, his fingers drumming with a deliberate slowness, almost savoring the moment. Then, without a flicker of empathy, he looked up and sneered. "I hope Miss Crockett isn't here to turn this into a circus." He said it flatly, his words cutting through the still air like a blade. No mention of the case. No recognition of her position as a state-appointed prosecutor. Just a single, dismissive sentence that hit harder than a slap to the face. It wasn't just an insult to her, it was an insult to everyone who had ever fought to be heard in a room that was never built for them. It wasn't just an insult to her, it was an insult to everyone who had ever worked in the legal system. Jasmine didn't flinch, but inside something cold and sharp sliced through her chest. A sudden realization made her stomach tighten. This wasn't just a courtroom, she wasn't facing a judge. She was standing before a man who had already chosen his side. And it was a side that didn't care about justice or truth. It was a side built on power, on the arrogance of those who had always been above the law. A soft, mocking laugh came from the back of the room, followed by others quiet but laced with venom. Jasmine felt their eyes, every sneer and dismissive glance. It wasn't just the judge, it was the whole room. Everyone from the clerk to the security officers had a role in this performance, and they were all complicit in a silent, calculated game. She scanned the room, searching the faces for even a flicker of neutrality. But all she saw were cold expressions, frozen in indifference. Each person played their part in a theater rehearsed too many times to change the script. Her grip tightened on the stack of files. Her fingernails dug into her palm, the pressure almost unbearable. But nothing compared to what rose inside her. She'd felt this before, isolated, out of place. She'd felt it defending clients as a public defender. But today was different. Today, the system wasn't just flawed, it was rigged. The judge wasn't impartial. The defense didn't care about truth. They'd already chosen their winner. And if Jasmine didn't play every move perfectly, she would be crushed. Not because she was wrong, not because she lacked evidence, but because she dared to show up. She wasn't supposed to be here. Not in this courtroom. Not in this fight. Power had always belonged to others, and they made it clear they would stop at nothing to make her fail. Every glance, every word, was designed to shrink her. But Jasmine knew she wasn't just fighting for justice. She was fighting for her right to exist in a space built to keep her out. If she lost today, it wouldn't just be a case, it would be everything she had ever fought for. This courtroom wasn't just a place of law anymore. It was a battleground, where truth would either rise or be buried beneath power, prejudice, and silence. She had to be precise. Every step, every word. Because if she faltered, the weight of their expectations would crush her. The silence in the room deepened, thick and suffocating. Jasmine stood at the edge of a precipice, and the only way out was forward. No turning back. The odds were stacked. But she wasn't going down without a fight, and she would make sure no one ever forgot what happened here today. She opened the file, pulled out a document stamped by the State Treasury Department, and stepped up to the podium with calm, unyielding poise. The evidence in her hands, budget sheets, wire transfers, investment fund reconciliations, wasn't just numbers. It was the concrete proof of corruption, millions of taxpayer dollars funneled into a shell company owned by Dominic Vance. Just as Jasmine began to speak, the judge interrupted with a sharp, dismissive tone. "Oh, not this again," he muttered, not even looking at her files. "I don't have time for boring numbers." He exchanged a smirk with the defense attorney. Laughter followed from the back row. Jasmine stayed composed, but the room's reaction stung. No one cared about the facts, only that she was the one presenting them. The jury avoided her eyes. Silence became complicity. She pressed on, "Your Honor, these transfers were verified by 3 independent agencies, twice the approved amount, into the defendant's company." Huxley laughed. "Very creative, Miss Crockett. Writing a novel?" Everyone knew she was right. But because she was a black woman, they mocked her. She didn't belong here, and they wanted her to feel it. The judge struck again. "So you're masking incompetence with documents." The insult wasn't legal, it was personal, and it came from the one meant to uphold justice. The room stayed silent. The defense smirked. A man muttered, "Who does she think she is?" Still, Jasmine stood tall. Her hands clenched, but her voice never shook. A whisper cut deeper. "Black female, and she thinks she can win here?" Finally, Huxley delivered the cruelest line. "Miss Crockett, tone down the theatrics. This isn't a stage for victims." He wasn't attacking her case. He was attacking her. The judge dismissed her with a sneer, not just her evidence, but her very presence. And worse, no one in the courtroom stood up for her. The silence was suffocating. Viewers in court and online felt her humiliation. She wasn't wrong. She was standing for truth and justice in a place where truth was treated like an inconvenience. But Jasmine didn't flinch. "Calm and steady," she said. "Then I will let the next piece of evidence speak for itself." She revealed a contract and approved $12.5 million budget, but records showed $248 million was transferred to the defendant's company. The key document, A transfer approval signed by Judge Raymond Huxley himself. His name lit up the screen. The room froze. The proof was undeniable, but Huxley barely looked at it. Invalid, he said coldly. Jasmine pressed back. This was official, subpoenaed, verified. Huxley didn't care. He met her eyes, not as a judge, but as a man with unchecked power. He tapped his gavel. Document discarded. Move on. Gasps echoed. Jasmine had just exposed a judge's illegal signature, and the system shrugged. She didn't stop. She showed the sealed original, backed by 3 federal agencies. The evidence was clear. 6 days before the land deal, Huxley approved the illegal transfer. He glanced at the screen, then turned away. The truth was staring back, but power refused to look. Huxley looked at Jasmine with a cold, cutting stare. This is a forged document, he declared, without evidence, without explanation. Just power misused. The room froze. No one questioned him. No one defended her. Jasmine knew then this wasn't justice. It was a performance. A courtroom where the judge was both the protector and the violator of the law. A court officer whispered to the clerk, who laughed. The camera panned away from the evidence. Vance sat calmly, as if he'd known it would all be erased. Her fists clenched, but she didn't shout or cry. She just stared at Huxley, not as a judge, but as a criminal cloaked in power. The audience held its breath. Realizing what she already knew, he had signed off on the crime and buried the truth. Then, from a speaker on her desk, Huxley's voice played, "Make sure that girl never gets near the ledger." Understood, the courtroom gasped. Everyone recognized it. His voice, direct, undeniable, caught ordering a cover-up. Huxley turned pale, then red. "This recording is illegal," he barked, no longer confident, but rattled. Jasmine held up the warrant. "This was legally obtained, verified by the state and federal inspector," the jury whispered. A woman in the back clutched her purse, eyes wide. "It's him." The room shifted. This wasn't just corruption, it was betrayal, a system exposed, and everyone who helped bury the truth now had to face it. The courtroom was no longer silent, it was tense, every breath held. Jasmine stepped forward and hit play again. The voice repeated, "I don't care how. Just make sure she never touches the ledger." It echoed like the final blow to any illusion of innocence. At that moment, the mask cracked. Huxley, once protected by power and authority, was exposed, a man who betrayed his oath. Yet the system had worked to shield him from accountability. Jasmine didn't flinch. She leaned forward and said, "Loud enough for all? Start talking or you'll be the next one in cuffs." The room froze. Her words weren't just for Vance anymore, they were for every person who had stayed silent, who had helped the corruption continue. This wasn't about winning a case, it was about dismantling the system that let injustice thrive. And Vance knew it. Jasmine wasn't just a prosecutor, she was the reckoning. Vance sat pale, hands trembling. The man once praised as a visionary developer now looked cornered, stripped of his power. After a long pause, he whispered, I need protection. No more arrogance. Only fear." His shield Raymond Huxley had just shattered. Jasmine gave a small nod, calm but ready. She pulled out a deposition form. She didn't ask why now. She already knew. The real battle had just begun. Jasmine never expected Vance to confess out of guilt. He wasn't a victim, he was the mastermind. Her anger wasn't just about his crimes, but about how he'd used the system to destroy lives. While being praised as a reformer, she placed a pen on the table and said firmly, "I need the list." Everyone involved. Vance nodded, shaken. But Jasmine wasn't just after names. Her focus was on all those still hiding in offices and politics behind money and power. She didn't want revenge. She wanted truth. Because millions had suffered in silence. Vance was only one link in a chain called what it truly was. Legalized crime. A week later, the U.S. Congress wasn't its usual stage for empty promises. That day, the nation watched as Jasmine Crockett walked to the podium in a black suit, without notes, without pretense. She wasn't giving a speech, she was delivering a reckoning. "I stand here today," she began, "not to relive a trial, but to say this. We cannot be a nation of justice if the judge himself betrays the truth." The room froze. Across the country, millions watched. An elderly woman cried. A black veteran clenched his fist. Jasmine continued. When someone like Raymond Huxley sits on the bench for 20 years selling justice to the wealthy, the failure isn't his alone. It's ours. One by one, people rose. Not to cheer, but to stand. Quiet. Unshaken. The applause that followed was not celebration. It was pain. It was truth finally spoken. Jasmine closed with quiet strength. No one is untouchable. No seat is above justice. If we want a just country, we must rebuild it with truth. And with the anger we've been taught to hide. And far away, in a small apartment in Chicago, an 8-year-old girl watched silently. She didn't understand every word, but she understood the look. A look that said, "I've had enough, and I'm not afraid." She stood and changed what no one else dared touch. Next to her, a tired mother, just off a 14-hour shift, lifted her head as Jasmine's final words echoed, "We cannot let this anger die in silence. Let it become the reason no one else has to fall." Her daughter turned and whispered, "Mom, I want to be like her." That quiet promise didn't need a grand stage. It carried more weight than any applause, because it showed outrage may not change the past, but it shapes the future. Jasmine couldn't see that little girl, but she had sparked a fire in court and in the hearts of millions. From single mothers in Baltimore to students at UCLA, from veterans to the homeless in New York, people dared to believe the system can change if someone exposes it. And that power didn't come from titles or elections. It came from truth, from anger that never cooled. Suppressed, anger becomes poison. Guided, it becomes purpose. And from one whispered promise, thousands of children, black, brown, white, now see the world differently. Because if she could stand up, maybe they can too. Jasmine Crockett's story isn't just a legal drama or a high-profile courtroom showdown. To me, it's a wake-up call, a relentless indictment of a system that has long claimed to protect justice, but too often protects only power. I don't just admire Jasmine for her intellect, her skill, or her composure. I admire her for her courage, the kind that walks alone into a room full of dismissive stares and stands tall anyway. She didn't just fight for the truth. She forced a nation to face the truth. The most powerful moment for me wasn't the audio recording or the confession. It was when she refused to flinch. When she stood still and made an entire courtroom hold its breath, not by yelling, but by existing fully and unapologetically in her truth. Jasmine made me realize justice doesn't just live in courtrooms. It lives in the hearts of the refused to be silent. It's not guaranteed, it's fought for, step by step, voice by voice. I hope there will be thousands, even millions more like her, not superheroes, but ordinary people with unshakable resolve. Because if one black woman can shake the foundations of power with truth and courage, then nothing is impossible. So if you've made it this far, ask yourself, will you remain silent? Or will you be part of the fire that carries her legacy forward? Let's choose to keep walking and never stop. Disclaimer: the character Jasmine Crockett is a real person. She is a lawyer, former prosecutor, and currently a member of the U.S. House of Representatives. However, the entire story presented in this video is a work of fiction, created for the purpose of inspiration and to reflect urgent social issues such as abuse of power, injustice, and racial discrimination. We do not intend to portray real events or attribute specific actions to any individual or organization. This is a creative work, symbolic, thought-provoking, and focused on social commentary rather than historical accuracy. Viewers are encouraged to engage with this content critically, with awareness, and to reflect on the deeper message it aims to convey.